by Elena Park. I didn't think I'd ever tell this story. For a long time, I kept it folded inside me like a letter I wrote but never sent. It felt too raw, too personal, too unfinished. But lately, I've started to realize that what I went through isn't just my story. It's our story. It belongs to thousands, maybe millions of people who woke up one day and realized that the world had changed, and they were no longer part of its design. If you're reading this, maybe you felt it too. That strange dissonance between the connected world and the disconnected self. The silent ache of feeling left behind while everything around you moves faster and shinier and smarter, especially the machines. I lost my job to AI. But more than that, I lost a part of myself I didn't know I had tethered to a job title, an email signature, a desk badge with my name on it. This isn't a story about technology. It's a story about what it means to be human when being human is no longer enough for the economy. It's about grief and shame and the quiet dignity of starting over when no one is watching. It's about a daughter's simple question that broke me open. It's about a dusty journal that reminded me who I used to be before life became so optimized. It's about reclaiming something that can't be automated, meaning. I'm not here to give you a list of 10 steps to reinvention. I'm here to tell you the truth, as I lived it raw, uncertain, and real. Maybe along the way, you'll find pieces of yourself in these pages too. Because while AI may be faster, cheaper, and smarter in some ways, it will never be you. And that's still your greatest advantage. So, let me begin where everything started to unravel. With an email. I didn't see it right away. That morning started like so many others had. The sky was draped in soft grey, and the light rain tapped gently against the kitchen window. I was making my daughter Ava's lunch peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, and a little note that said, "You've got this," in my hurried handwriting. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, humming something from a cartoon she liked, her socks mismatched again. I didn't have the heart to fix them. When she finally rushed out the door with her backpack bouncing, I exhaled. The house, for a moment, felt quiet in that way only a home with a child can, like it had been holding its breath until now. I poured myself coffee, opened my laptop, and clicked into my inbox. That's when I saw it. Subject: Organizational restructure, immediate action required. At first, I thought it was another team shuffle, maybe a departmental update. But the moment I opened the email, something inside me shifted. My eyes scanned the words, but it was like trying to read underwater. Each line blurred with the next. Dear Elena, as part of our transition to AI-driven systems and long-term efficiency initiatives, your position has been impacted by recent restructuring. Your role will be phased out effective immediately. I stopped breathing. It was as if someone had pulled the ground out from beneath me but left me standing, somehow. That email, barely 200 words long, erased 11 years of my life. 11 years of team meetings, late-night calls, conflict resolutions, training modules, performance reviews, and coffee-stained notebooks filled with scribbles no one else could decipher but me. Gone. Just like that. I don't know how long I sat there. The coffee went cold. The rain thickened against the glass. The fridge hummed softly. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's dog barked. I reached out, reflexively, and clicked again. As if reading the words one more time would change them. As if they had made a mistake. As if maybe I had misunderstood. But there it was, clear as day. Your severance package will include transitional support and access to our career upskilling platform. We thank you for your service. Service, I whispered aloud, the word catching in my throat like a splinter. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I stood up, poured the coffee down the sink, sat back down, opened Slack. My team's channel was full of silence broken only by a few sad emojis and a message from Rachel that just said, "They really did it." I checked LinkedIn. 3 of my colleagues had already updated their statuses, open to work. Open to what, exactly? To being replaced again? To selling your soul in smaller pieces? I wasn't just grieving a job. I was grieving the illusion of stability. The belief that if you worked hard, were loyal, and really cared you were safe. I had done everything right. I stayed late. I coached junior agents. I memorized protocols, even rewrote some when they didn't make sense. I had value-added in TI. But now, it seemed, my value had an expiration date. And it had come. Around noon, I finally cried. Not loud sobs. Just a slow, unrelenting release, the kind where tears fall before you even realize you're crying. I sat on the floor, back against the kitchen cabinet, and let it happen. The ceramic tile was cold beneath me. My hands felt heavy. My chest, hollow. I thought of Ava. Of how I'd tell her. Of what I'd say when she asked why I wasn't going to work tomorrow. Of how I'd hide the fear in my voice when she looked at me with those curious, trusting eyes. I thought of the mortgage, the bills, her piano lessons, the stupid cracked phone screen I kept putting off fixing. Then, I thought of my father. He had worked in a printing press his whole life. His hands were thick, always ink-stained. I remember once, when I was a teenager, watching him come home after his shift, sitting at the edge of the bed and peeling off his boots, wincing. I had asked him, "Do you ever think about quitting?" He looked at me and smiled. "I don't think about that. I think about who I'm doing it for." And here I was, years later, working for a company that now thought I was no longer necessary. He lost his job too, I remembered. When the company downsized and outsourced everything. He was 54. Maybe it runs in the family. Later that day, Ava came home from school and dropped her backpack on the floor like she always does. She didn't notice my red eyes, at least not right away. She started telling me about her spelling test, about a boy who said fart in class and got detention, about how she drew a bird with 6 legs and named it Professor Wiggles. I laughed. Or tried to. She narrowed her eyes. "Mommy, are you okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Just tired." She came over, stood between my knees, and placed her hands on my cheeks. "Are you sad tired or work tired?" It was such an Ava thing to ask. She had this way of knowing when I was pretending. Like she saw straight through the performance adults put on for children's sake. "Sad tired," I whispered. She didn't say anything else. Just leaned forward and hugged me. And for a moment, the kitchen didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a harbor. That night, after she fell asleep, I opened my laptop again. I stared at the email for a long time, hovering over the delete button. But I didn't press it. Instead, I opened a blank document. I wrote, "Today, I lost my job. But that's not the whole story." I paused. Then I kept going. I didn't know why, exactly. Maybe because writing made me feel like I still existed, like my thoughts still mattered even if my role didn't. I wrote about how the kitchen felt like a stranger's home. About the way the rain felt different now. About Ava's mismatched socks and how I hadn't even tried to fix them because everything else had felt too broken. I wrote until past midnight. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. I wish I could tell you that was the turning point. That everything got better from there. That I rose up, stronger than ever, and turned my pain into a purpose. But that's not how real life works. What came next was messy, slow, filled with doubt and small moments that didn't look like progress but were. It wasn't a comeback. It was a becoming. But I'll get to that. This is just the beginning. They used to tell us we were the heart of the company. I remember the all-hands meetings, the company-wide emails with phrases like customer-first culture and our human touch sets us apart. I believed it. I lived it. I thought I was part of something important, something that couldn't function without people like me. Maybe that's why it hurt so much. Because I didn't just lose a paycheck. I lost the illusion that I mattered. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The house was quiet, and for a split second, I forgot. I lay there under the covers, my hand instinctively reaching toward my phone, already thinking about the tickets I'd need to escalate, the team huddle at 10, and that follow-up email I forgot to send yesterday. Then I remembered. And it hit me all over again. There was no meeting. No inbox waiting. No reason to check Slack. No one was expecting me. I got up anyway. Ava was still asleep. I watched her for a moment. That peacefulness. That small, unconscious trust in the world to keep going. I envied it. I made coffee out of habit, not because I wanted it. I stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the fridge, not seeing anything. My thoughts were loud, sharp, restless, accusatory. How could they do this? Did I miss the signs? Was I really that replaceable? I opened my laptop, half hoping the email had vanished overnight. It hadn't. The screen blinked to life, cold and matter-of-fact. No Slack pings. No red notifications. Just an empty inbox, like a ghost town. I opened a blank document again. Not to write anything profound. Just to let something out. I thought I was irreplaceable. Not in a grand way. Not in a they can't live without me way. But in a I've given myself to this way. In an I made this work better way. In an I cared way. I paused, staring at the blinking cursor. What do you do when the part of you that believed in purpose suddenly flickers? That afternoon, I went for a walk. I hadn't done that in a while. Not just a stroll to the store or to Ava's school, but an aimless walk, no goal, no deadline. The streets were wet from the rain. The sky hung low and thick, like it hadn't decided yet whether to clear or cry again. I passed a bookstore I used to love and walked in on impulse. It smelled like ink and dust and the quiet kind of wisdom that only exists between paper and page. I wandered, fingers trailing across spines, not really looking for anything. And then, on a shelf marked Transitions, I saw it. What you do is not who you are. I picked it up. Read the first line. We wrap our identities in titles, but identity is much larger than what we do for a living. I closed the book. It felt like it had punched me in the chest. Gently, but clearly. That night, after dinner, Ava asked, "Mom, why are you home today?" I had been waiting for the question. I knelt beside her as she played with her Legos. "Remember when we talked about how things change sometimes, even if we don't want them to?" She nodded. "Like when they cancelled the pumpkin field trip last year?" "Exactly," I smiled. "Well, the place Mommy worked at, they're changing too. They decided they don't need people for my job anymore." She frowned. "So, they want robots?" I laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Kind of, yes. Did you do something wrong?" My heart twisted. "No, sweetie. I didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people just make choices based on money or speed, not care." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "That's dumb." I smiled. "Yeah, it kind of is." She handed me one of her Lego blocks. "You can work with me. I'm building a zoo with a dragon in it." And just like that, for the first time in 2 days, I remembered what it felt like to be seen. Later, after she was in bed, I sat down and opened that same blank document. I wrote more. Not for anyone to read. Just for me. Just to prove that I still had words inside me. I wrote about the first time I was promoted. How proud I had been. How I stayed late that night, not because I had to, but because I wanted to earn it, deserve it. I wrote about my team, Rachel, who always made puns, Marcus, who pretended to hate birthdays but secretly loved the attention, Jaya, who never missed a single metrics goal. I missed them already. The next morning, I did something strange. I got dressed like I was going to work. I did my hair. Put on a little makeup. It wasn't about pretending, more like refusing to disappear. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, fingers hovering. And I said out loud, "You're still here." Not to the laptop. To myself. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you're not unknown. I didn't know I'd been crying until Ava reached out and wiped my cheek. She had walked into the room without me hearing her, small and silent as she always was when she knew something was wrong. I had been staring at a blank page for 20 minutes, my fingers hovering over the keys, my thoughts tangled in a web of questions too heavy for language. Her little hand was warm against my face. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked gently, like she already knew the answer. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to protect her from all of the Rizumi fear, my shame, my unraveling. But instead, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I told the truth. "I'm not sure, baby," I said. "But I think I will be." She nodded, like that was enough. Then she curled up next to me on the couch, holding my arm the way she used to when she was younger, back when she believed I could fix everything. I stayed still, grateful for the contact, for the quiet, for the permission to not be okay. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table again. The email still sat in my inbox like a wound that wouldn't close. I didn't open it this time. I didn't need to. I could recite it word for word. I wasn't ready to delete it. Deleting it felt like accepting it. Like letting go of a part of me I wasn't ready to grieve. I clicked open LinkedIn instead. My feed was filled with articles about navigating the AI future, career resilience, upskilling. Everyone suddenly seemed to be a thought leader, a coach, a survivor. I felt like an observer at a party I hadn't been invited to. A message notification popped up. Rachel, can't sleep. Just thinking, how did we not see it coming? I stared at her message for a long time before typing. Me, because we were busy caring too much to think they'd stop needing us. The next day, I decided to clean. Not for productivity. Not to distract myself. I needed to clear physical space so I could breathe again. I opened the hall closet and found a box labeled old journals. I had nearly forgotten about them. There were 6 worn at the edges, one still wrapped in plastic. I hadn't written in a journal since Ava was 5. I picked up the red one and opened to a random page. March 14th, 2016. I don't know what I'm doing, but I keep showing up. That has to count for something. I hope someday Ava will understand why I work so much. I hope she forgives me for all the nights I come home too tired to play. I closed the book. That version of me had been just as tired, just as unsure, just as full of questions. The only difference was that back then, I thought working harder would eventually fix everything. Now, I knew better. That evening, I made dinner slowly. Not in the rushed, robotic way I used to when work was still my center of gravity. I chopped vegetables mindfully. I let the rice cook without checking the timer a dozen times. I lit a candle. It wasn't for anyone but us, but somehow, that made it feel sacred. Ava noticed. "Are we having a special dinner?" she asked. I smiled. "Every dinner with you is special." She gave me a look. "Okay, but did you lose your job forever?" I paused. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe I'll find something new. Or maybe I'll make something new. Like a job you build yourself." "Yeah," I said, surprised by how good that sounded. "Exactly like that." She nodded. "Can I help?" And there it was again, that light in her, that belief that problems had solutions, that building something new wasn't a tragedy but a game, a challenge, a story waiting to be written. That night, I wrote until 1 a.m. I wrote about my childhood. About how I used to write poems under my blanket with a flashlight. About the teacher who once told me my words made her cry, but I stopped writing because being a writer felt like a dream people couldn't afford. I wrote about my first job in customer service, how I learned to listen not just to what people were saying, but to what they meant. How empathy became my hidden superpower. How no metric could capture the way a customer's tone softened when they felt heard. And I wrote this. They took the job. But they can't take the part of me that knew how to listen, how to care, how to hold space for others. That part doesn't belong to any company. That part is mine. In the morning, I printed that sentence and taped it to the wall beside my desk. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a new job. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings are enough. We live in a world of constant connection, and yet so many of us feel unseen. Anonymous. It's a strange thing feeling lonely when you're technically not alone. I had text threads with friends. Notifications still lit up my phone. There were Slack messages from former co-workers, posts on LinkedIn about resilience and reinvention, and Ava's endless stories about school and the things kids say that don't make sense but somehow do. And yet, I felt like I was on the outside of everything, watching life through a window I couldn't open. On the fourth day after the email, I walked into a cafe I used to love. It had floor-to-ceiling windows and quiet music, the kind of place people went to look busy or look introspective, or maybe both. I brought a book, but mostly I brought my loneliness. I ordered a chai latte and sat near the window, pretending to read. Around me, people typed furiously on laptops, took Zoom calls in hushed tones, scrolled through feeds, nodded at nothing. Their faces looked purposeful, like they belonged somewhere. I used to feel that way, too. I used to open my laptop with a sense of direction. Now, it just felt like opening a door to a house that had already been emptied. I watched people smile into their screens. I watched couples laugh over shared pastries. I watched a mother rock her baby while answering emails with one hand. And I wondered how many of them felt like I did. Like ghosts dressed up as functioning adults. When I got home, I scrolled social media for no reason. Everyone seemed fine. Better than fine. Productive. Beautiful. Motivated. Taking a leap into the next chapter. Just launched my new coaching platform. The layoff was a blessing in disguise. I felt broken just reading it. No one posted about the shame of not knowing who you are anymore. No one took a selfie with tears in their cereal. No one uploaded the moment they realized their identity had been built entirely around a company badge and a job description. So I opened my notes app and typed, "I don't know who I am without the emails. Without the schedule. Without the team asking, 'Elena, can you check this for me?'" I stared at the sentence. I wanted to post it. I really did. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered it to the ceiling. And that would have to be enough for today. That evening, I made soup. The kind that takes time, where you simmer onions until they're golden, where you taste and adjust and taste again. I used to rush everything. Now I had nothing to rush toward. Ava sat at the table drawing. She asked me if dragons ever get sad. I said I didn't know, but I imagined they did. Especially the ones who lost their fire. She drew a dragon with blue tears and named it Cloudy. She said Cloudy was learning how to cry and breathe fire at the same time. "That's kind of hard to do," I said. She shrugged. "Yeah, but dragons are tough." I looked at her, this small person who had no idea she was saving me a little bit each day just by existing. That night, I decided to call my sister. We hadn't talked much lately. Our lives had drifted into parallel lanes, close but separate. She picked up on the second ring. "Elena," she said. "Is everything okay?" The question startled me. I hadn't even said hello yet. "I got laid off," I said. There was a long pause. Then, "Oh my God. When?" "4 days ago." "Why didn't you call?" I laughed. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to cry on your voicemail. We talked for over an hour. About work. About the world. About how fast everything was changing. She said she was scared, too scared, that the work she spent a decade mastering might be next on the chopping block. "It's like we're being outrun by something we can't even see," she said. "Or understand," I added. "But we're not machines, she said finally. We weren't designed to keep up. That stuck with me. After we hung up, I felt lighter. Still uncertain. Still afraid. But not invisible. It made me think maybe loneliness isn't always about being without people. Maybe it's about being without truth. About not having anyone to be real with. We spend so much time curating ourselves, editing our pain, filtering our sadness, wrapping it in lessons or silver linings. But sometimes, the most healing thing we can do is say, I'm not okay, and have someone respond, me neither. That night, I wrote again. I wrote about the cafe. I wrote about Cloudy the dragon. I wrote about my sister's voice on the other end of the line, grounding me. Then I wrote this. Maybe the real danger isn't losing your job. Maybe it's losing your voice in a world that no longer listens. I pressed save. And for the first time that week, I slept through the night. Sometimes you don't start over by adding more. You begin by letting go. Brianna Wiest. The day I stopped updating my resume was the same day I admitted to myself I didn't want to go back to who I was. That version of me, efficient, responsive, endlessly available, had been praised, promoted, and overextended. But she had also been exhausted, invisible to herself, and slowly dissolving into whatever the company needed her to be. So when I opened that Word document labeled resume_2023_final_real one, I stared at it for a long time. My cursor blinked, waiting for action. But my fingers didn't move. What would I even write? Team leader with 11 years of experience in caring too much? Excelled in overextending herself for metrics that were redefined every quarter? Replaced by something faster but not warmer? I closed the document. Not in defeat, but in rebellion. That afternoon, I did something that felt both silly and sacred. I walked to the public library. It was the first time I'd been there in over a year. Life had gotten too busy for books that didn't serve a professional purpose. I used to love wandering the aisles, letting titles find me. Now, I was here not to be productive but to be lost. On purpose. I roamed until my feet hurt. Then I sat in a corner chair near the large windows and opened a random book. It was a collection of essays on transformation. In the first few pages, there was a quote I hadn't seen before. You cannot grow into who you're meant to be without unlearning who you were taught to be. I underlined it with my eyes. Maybe that's what this chapter of my life was about. Not upgrading, but unlearning. Unlearning how to measure my worth in output. Unlearning the urge to respond instantly to every ping. Unlearning that burnout is a badge of commitment. I had spent years becoming excellent at things that now didn't matter. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. Because it forced me to ask, what do I actually care about when I'm not being told what matters? That night, after Ava went to bed, I sat outside on the porch with a blanket and a notebook. Not the laptop. Not the blinking cursor and infinite tabs. Just pen and paper. I wrote things I want to unlearn. Saying I'm fine when I'm breaking. Apologizing for needing rest. Believing busy means important. Thinking self-worth is earned by exhaustion. Measuring love in achievement. It felt like opening a locked drawer inside my chest. I added things I want to remember. I was whole before I had a job title. I'm still worthy when I'm quiet. Kindness is not a soft skill. Ava sees me, not my resume. I get to start over, not because I failed but because I've grown. The next morning, I made a new kind of to-do list. It had exactly 3 things on it. Go for a walk without headphones. Cook something slowly. Write for 30 minutes without editing. That was it. No job boards. No networking calls. No webinars about rebranding yourself after a layoff. Just life. Unfiltered. It felt like rebellion. It felt like healing. Later that evening, Ava asked if we could plant something. Like a flower, I said. No, she replied. Like something we can eat. We walked to the store and bought a small pot, soil, and basil seeds. She wanted to paint the pot, so we sat outside with brushes and colors. She drew suns and stars and one very lopsided smiley face. We planted the seeds just before sunset. She pressed them into the soil gently, like they were sleeping. How long will it take? She asked. A few weeks, I said. They'll need sunlight, water, patience. Like people? I smiled. Exactly like people. That night, I wrote. Maybe I'm not starting over. Maybe I'm just planting new roots. And for the first time, I'm asking myself, what kind of life do I want to grow into? There is a version of you who still remembers what it feels like to dream. Go find her. Nikita Gill. It started with a library card. A tiny piece of laminated plastic with my name on it, a barcode, and an expiration date I had never paid attention to. I found it wedged between old receipts in my wallet while searching for Ava's school lunch card. It was still valid. That felt like a sign. I walked to the library again that morning, not for escape this time but for something closer to remembering. The air inside was the same, slightly dusty, comfortingly quiet, full of hidden stories. I wandered to the non-fiction section, not out of habit, but instinct. Something about that part of the library had always called to me. Not because it was full of facts, but because it was full of real. Memoirs. Essays. Observations about life from people who'd bothered to write it down. I don't know why, but I found myself in the writing section. Maybe because part of Melong buried under career goals and productivity app still remembered how much I once loved words. I ran my fingers across a familiar title. On Writing by Stephen King. I had read it in college, underlining everything, dreaming about someday. I picked it up again, flipped to a random page, and read. The scariest moment is always just before you start. I laughed quietly. How appropriate. When I got home, I dusted off an old box in the closet labeled college stuff. Inside were printed essays, scribbled poems, a USB stick I was afraid to plug in, and a blue notebook with stickers on the cover. I opened it. On the first page, in my 20-year-old handwriting. One day I'll write something that makes someone feel seen. I stared at it for a long time. My eyes blurred. Not from sadness, exactly. From recognition. That girl, the one who believed her voice could matter, was still in here somewhere. I had just forgotten how to hear her. That evening, after Ava went to sleep, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a story. Not for work. Not for strategy. Not for audience alignment. Just a story. About a girl who lived in a town that forgot how to speak out loud. And how she climbed to the top of a mountain just to shout, "I'm still here," until someone else shouted back, "Me too." It wasn't perfect. The ending felt rushed. But when I finished, I felt more alive than I had in months. Maybe years. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and my notebook. I started writing again, this time a letter. Not to a person. To a part of myself. Dear writer, I'm sorry I abandoned you. I thought growing up meant being practical. I thought building a life meant sacrificing the things that lit me up. But I see now we were never supposed to trade purpose for paychecks. I'm not promising fame or publication or even consistency. But I'm promising this, I will come back to you. Even if it's just 10 minutes a day. Even if no one else ever reads it. Because you are where my truth lives. And I miss being true. I signed it, Love, Me. Later that week, I brought Ava to the library. She picked out 3 books, one about space, one about baking, and one about a cat who could talk. I watched her sit cross-legged in the children's section, reading with her mouth slightly open, completely lost in another world. "How come you never told me libraries were this cool?" she asked. I smiled. I forgot for a while. "Well, don't forget again." "I won't," I said. "Promise." That night, I dreamed about bookshelves that stretched to the sky. About ladders made of pencils. About words glowing like lanterns, waiting for someone to pick them up. When I woke up, I wasn't sure if I had dreamed it or remembered it. Maybe both. I opened my laptop. Not to job boards. Not to rewrite my resume. But to write. No goal. No audience. Just me. And that girl with the dream. Still here. Still writing. You are not your output. You are not your resume. You are the warmth in your voice, the thought in your pause, the courage in your care. Unknown. A few days after my visit to the library, I got a LinkedIn message from an old colleague named Cam. He had been part of our operations team. We weren't particularly close, but we'd collaborated on a few tricky escalations, and I'd always admired his calmness under pressure. His message was simple. "Elena, I heard what happened. I was laid off too. Want to talk sometime? I've been trying to figure out how to make sense of it all." I stared at the message longer than I needed to. Then I typed, "Yes. I'd like that." We scheduled a video call the next day. It felt strange getting camera ready again. I changed out of my soft house hoodie and into something with buttons. I even put on earrings. The kind of things you do not because you have to, but because you want to remember how to hold your head up. Cam greeted me with a tired smile. "I miss having real conversations," he said right away. I nodded. "Me too." We talked for almost 2 hours. Not just about the layoffs, but about identity, direction, loss. He confessed that part of him felt ashamed for not being valuable enough to keep. I told him I had felt the same. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You know, I was thinking about that customer who called in last year, the elderly woman who was panicking because she couldn't figure out how to reset her modem. You talked to her for almost an hour. Calmed her down. Walked her through every step. That kind of patience. AI can't replicate that. It doesn't feel real. I remembered her. I remembered the way she whispered, "Thank you for not rushing me." And how I told her, "Take your time. I'm here." It had been just another day. But somehow, it wasn't. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. And then I wrote at the top of a fresh page in my notebook. Things AI can't do. Sit in stillness with another human's fear. Hear what isn't being said. Recognize when a person needs silence instead of advice. Understand the difference between solving a problem and soothing a soul. Feel pride after a small, thankless kindness. Pause for breath when grief enters the conversation. Laugh not because something is funny, but because two people suddenly feel less alone. The next morning, I walked to the bakery down the street. The owner, Ms. Lynn, greeted me like she always did by name, with a smile and a question about Ava's piano lessons. Her bakery had survived the pandemic, inflation, 2 rent increases. Not because of automation, not because of analytics, but because of relationships. People didn't just come for her pastries. They came because she remembered their stories. "Trying something new today?" she asked. I smiled. "Maybe. Something warm." She handed me a sesame bun and said, "This one always feels like comfort." I thought, this is what humans do. We match food with feelings. We make small gestures sacred. We offer comfort that isn't coded but known. When I got home, I wrote again. I didn't know where it was going, just that it needed to come out. A memory surfaced me very first day on the job, 11 years ago. I had been nervous, unsure. My trainer, a woman named Joy, told me, "It's not about having the right answer. It's about being the calm in their storm." That line stayed with me. And now, all these years later, I understood its deeper meaning. AI could deliver answers faster than I ever could. But it couldn't be the calm. It couldn't hold space for fear, for grief, for uncertainty. It couldn't be human. That night, Ava asked, "Are you going to have a job again soon?" I thought for a moment. "I think I'm building something instead." She tilted her head. "Like a house?" "No," I laughed. "Like a new kind of work. But first I need to figure out what parts of me I want to take with me." She considered that. "Don't forget the part that likes tea and books and hugs." I wrote that down. Note to self, keep the part that likes tea and books and hugs. Later, I taped this to my wall. You were never just your productivity. You were never just your salary. You were never just your title. You were always quietly, beautifully something no algorithm could replicate. I looked at it every morning after that. And for the first time in a long time, I felt irreplaceable again. But this time, for the right reasons. Sometimes the thing you do on the side is the most honest version of you. Cleo Wade. It started with a comment. I had posted a short piece on Medium, just a reflection on losing my job, finding silence, and the strange grief that comes when your inbox goes still. I wasn't expecting anyone to read it. But within a day, it had over 1,000 views. People commented. People shared. People said, "You just put into words what I couldn't." One woman messaged me privately, "Elena, I cried reading this. I thought I was the only one who felt so invisible after being replaced. Please keep writing. Your voice matters. It shook something awake in me. Because for years, I had written email templates, training guides, performance reviews. But this was mine. No one edited it. No one approved it. No one told me to make it more on brand. And yet, somehow, it mattered more. A few days later, Cam called again. Have you ever thought about turning your writing into something bigger? He asked. Like what? I laughed. A blog about crying in sweatpants. Actually, he said, yes. I rolled my eyes, but that night, I opened a Google Doc and titled it. Working Through It, Notes from a Human in Transition. No deadline. No strategy. Just a space to think out loud. And when I shared it gently, hesitantly people responded. Not with likes, but with stories. One woman wrote, I started baking again after reading your piece. A man in Singapore said, you helped me feel seen in a culture that says men shouldn't grieve layoffs. And I thought, maybe this is work. Maybe we've been measuring the wrong things all along. That weekend, I took Ava to the farmer's market. She skipped beside me, holding a tote bag full of carrots and fresh bread. A woman at a soap stall stopped me. Excuse me, she said. Are you Elena Park? Did you write that piece on Medium about being laid off? I blinked. Yes, I did. She smiled. Thank you. I've been following your writing. It's helping more people than you know. I stood there, stunned. For the first time in months, I felt like I was being recognized not for what I used to dob you for who I was becoming. That night, I made a list in my journal. Side things I might actually want to turn into main things. Writing reflections for people in career transition. Starting a newsletter about mindful work. Creating journaling prompts for people recovering from burnout. Speaking to small groups about the emotional side of layoffs. Teaching Ava how to name feelings instead of hiding them. I looked at the list and thought, none of this would have fit in my old job description. But maybe that's the point. Cam and I decided to collaborate. We hosted a free virtual gathering for anyone laid off in the last year. Just a space to talk. No pitch. No agenda. Just breathing room. 23 people showed up. One woman cried within 5 minutes. One man said, I haven't spoken out loud about this to anyone until today. We all sat in our little Zoom boxes, nodding, some muted, some shaker-voiced, but all, somehow, together. I logged off that call and cried. Not from sadness. From clarity. This was work. This was purpose. This was impact. No salary. No manager. No benefits. But so much meaning. I still wasn't sure what to call it. A side hustle. A healing practice. A reimagining of career. Maybe it didn't need a name yet. Maybe it just needed space to grow. That evening, I lit a candle and made tea. Ava sat beside me, doodling on a notepad. What are you doing? She asked. Trying to make something new. She thought for a moment. Is it for money? Maybe someday, I said. But mostly, it's for me. And maybe for other people too. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she handed me a drawing. It was a heart. But not just one, dozens, all connected with small lines like constellations. "This is what you do," she said. "You connect hearts." I looked at her, stunned. And I thought, yes, that's it. That's what I do now. Be the person you needed when you were younger. Aisha Siddiqui. I don't know what made me start writing the letters. Maybe it was the quiet one morning after Ava left for school. Maybe it was the photo I found of myself at 20, wide-eyed, messy hair, holding a cup of gas station coffee and a notebook full of dreams. Or maybe it was just time. Time to stop running forward long enough to turn around and face her. The girl I used to be. The one I never really said goodbye to. The one I never properly thanked. The first letter was short. Almost clumsy. "Dear me, age 22. I know you're scared. You don't have to pretend you're not. Everyone around you seems so sure of their careers, their timelines, their shiny, 5-year plans. But you're still trying to figure out what you actually want. That's okay. You think success will make the fear go away. It won't. But you'll find something better, peace. And you'll learn it doesn't come from proving your worth, but from remembering you already have it. Also, drink more water. And keep writing. Even when no one reads it. Especially then. Love, you, age 38. That letter opened a floodgate. The next day, I wrote to my 27-year-old self, the one who was pregnant and terrified, wondering if she'd ever be enough for a child. Then to the version of me at 30, working late while Ava slept, feeling guilty for every missed bedtime and every birthday she had to plan last minute. Then to the version of me at 35, so burnt out she cried in the parking lot before meetings. With each letter, something softened. I stopped judging her. I started seeing her. All the parts of me I used to carry with shame now felt sacred. One night, I printed one of the letters and folded it neatly into a small envelope. I tucked it into Ava's memory boxer collection of her artwork, baby shoes, and notes to the Tooth Fairy. I wrote on the envelope, "For when you're older and need reminding, because someday she'll have doubts too. She'll feel lost. She'll think she has to become someone shinier, more efficient, more impressive. And I want her to know she was already enough, the whole time." That week, I decided to share one letter publicly. Just one. It was the one I wrote to my 30-year-old self. The caption was simple, for anyone who's ever felt like they were too tired to matter. It went viral. Thousands of shares. Hundreds of messages. People wrote. I didn't know I needed this. I thought I was the only one. I'm crying at my desk right now. And I thought, this is what healing sounds like when someone else says, "Me too." A few days later, Ava asked what I was writing. "Letters," I said. "To who?" "To myself. But also to anyone who's ever needed kindness from someone who gets it." She thought for a moment. "Can I write one too?" She grabbed a notepad and wrote, "Dear me. Don't forget that even if school is hard, you are still smart. Even if you feel small, you are still strong. And if someone is mean, it's not your fault. Love, me." I hugged her like I was holding the entire world. That night, I lit a candle and read my letters again. Each one was a thread pulling me closer to wholeness, one version of myself at a time. And I realized, we leave behind so many versions of ourselves. But what if they never left? What if they're just waiting for us to turn around and say, I see you. I honor you. Thank you for surviving long enough to become me. Your wound is probably not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility, and your story might be someone else's survival guide. Nikaya Homer. It started with a message from someone I'd never met. She had read one of my letters and wrote, I lost my job last month. Same story. Replaced by a chatbot. I've been pretending I'm okay for my kids. But I'm not. And reading your words felt like someone lit a match in a dark room I'd been sitting in alone. I stared at the message for a long time. A part of me wanted to reply with something clever or comforting or polished. But instead, I wrote, Me too. I was in that room. You're not crazy. You're not broken. And you're not alone. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning. In the weeks that followed, more people reached out. They weren't looking for advice. They were looking for witnessing. To be heard. To be seen. To not be met with a link to a job board or a cheerful "you got this" from someone who hadn't cried in weeks. They wanted realness. So I gave them mine. I started recording voice notes, short, honest reflections. Not edited. Just me, walking through the park or sitting in my car, talking to whoever needed it. I called it Notes from the After. I posted the first one on a whim. It was about the first day I made tea without crying. The second one was about learning to receive kindness without guilt. The third, how I stopped measuring my worth in calendars and check marks. People listened. And they stayed. Then came the invitation. A woman named Lara emailed me. She ran a community group for women in transition, layoffs, divorce, health struggles. She asked if I would lead a small virtual workshop about redefining purpose. I almost said no. Who was I to lead anything? But then I remembered, I wasn't leading. I was just lighting the path I had walked myself. So I said yes. The workshop had 12 women. Some turned off their cameras. Some stayed silent. One cried before we even began. I started not with slides, but with this. This is not a place to be fixed. This is a place to be found. We talked about grief, the kind that doesn't show up in obituaries. We talked about identity and invisibility and how exhausting it is to be resilient all the time. By the end, the chat was full of things like, I thought I was the only one. Thank you for giving us permission to be real. This was the first time I didn't feel ashamed of where I am. I logged off and sobbed. Because this mattered. More than any performance review I had ever received. More than any KPI I had ever hit. This was what I was meant to do. That night, I went back to my original layoff email. For the first time, I didn't feel angry reading it. I didn't feel small. I felt grateful. Because that loss had given birth to something real. It didn't just take something away. It cleared space. Ava was brushing her teeth when she turned to me and asked, Are you happy now? I didn't rush the answer. I think I'm becoming happy, I said. One piece at a time. She nodded, satisfied. Then she said, I think you're like a lighthouse now. You're helping people find the shore. I laughed. Where did you learn that? You, she said. From your story. And suddenly, I realized. She was listening. She was watching. And more than anything else, she was learning how to rise again because she had watched me do it, in real time. You don't go back to who you were. You grow into who you were always meant to be. Brianna Wiest. People talk a lot about finding yourself. As if you were a missing sock behind the dryer. As if the old you was simply waiting to be dusted off and put back on. But what no one tells you is that sometimes, you don't find yourself again. You build yourself piece by deliberate piece. And that's what I was doing now. Not returning. Not restoring. Becoming. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in layers. Quietly. Softly. Without applause. It happened the morning I turned down a job offer, not because I was ungrateful, but because I knew it would cost me parts of myself I had just fought to reclaim. It happened the day Ava came home with a drawing of a book, and on the cover, she had written, "By Mom." It happened when I heard myself say in a video, without hesitation, "I help people remember who they are when the world makes them forget." And I believed it. I had no 5-year plan. No business cards. No guarantee. But I had trust. Not blind faith, but the kind of trust that comes from surviving something you thought would break you, and discovering it had actually shaped you instead. I no longer craved stability the way I used to. I craved integrity, alignment, peace. And I was willing to risk uncertainty for those things. I started saying no more often. No to things that drained me. No to roles that muted me. No to the version of success that required self-abandonment. But I also started saying yes. Yes to collaborations that felt aligned, even if they didn't pay yet. Yes to writing pieces that felt too raw. Yes to being visible, not perfectly, but honestly. I said yes to rest, to slowness, to enoughness. And slowly, the world began to meet me where I was. An editor reached out, asking if I'd consider writing a column on work transitions. A small non-profit offered me a part-time role helping others tell their layoff stories. I was invited to speak on a podcast about reinvention after disruption. These weren't grand moments, but they were true moments. And that made them sacred. One night, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered to myself, "You are not who you were. You are not what you lost. You are not just what you do." I looked into my own eyes, not searching for flaws, but recognizing home. I took Ava to the park the next day. She climbed a tree and waved at me from a branch like a tiny queen. "Do I look different from up here?" she shouted. I smiled. "A little. Everything feels bigger," she said. "But also smaller." I nodded. "That's how change works." She hung upside down for a moment and asked, "Do you think trees get scared when they grow?" I paused. "I think they stretch anyway." Later, she curled beside me on the couch and asked, "Are you someone new now?" I kissed the top of her head. "I think I'm someone more now." She nodded. "Me too. You are not behind. You are becoming." Morgan Harper Nichols. It's been almost a year now. A year since the email. A year since the ground beneath me cracked open and I fell into something I thought I wouldn't survive. And yet, here I am. Not restored to who I was. but reborn into someone I never imagined I could be. The world has continued to shift. More jobs automated. More companies optimizing. More people whispering their fears into search bars at 2 a.m., wondering if they're next. But something else is happening too. People are remembering that they are more than what they produce, more than what they post, more than how quickly they can respond to an email. And I'm one of them. I speak now, not because I have all the answers, but because I've lived the questions. I speak to groups of people in transitions: career, identity, purpose. I tell them what I once needed someone to tell me. You were never meant to compete with machines. You were meant to connect where machines cannot. And when I say that, I watch their faces soften. I watch their posture change. I watch something in them exhale. That is the human advantage. Not speed, not scale, not memory, but meaning. I still write letters. To myself. To strangers. Sometimes just to the sky. I write when I feel small. When I feel powerful. When I need to remember. Because writing, for me, is how I stay real. How I keep the signal clear in a world full of noise. The podcast is growing. Slowly. Gently. It's not viral. It's not flashy. But it's true. People tell me they listen in the car, on walks, while washing dishes. They say it feels like a friend sitting beside them, reminding them they're not broken. Just unfolding. That's the highest work I've ever done. Ava is thriving. She drew a picture of our new life for a school project. It showed me writing at my desk, her beside me with crayons, and a caption that said, "My mom used to work for a company. Now she works for people's hearts." I keep it taped to my wall. It reminds me every day that the pain wasn't the end. It was the doorway. To you, if you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for walking with me through this story. For holding space for my grief, my becoming, my quiet rediscovery. If you're here because you lost something, a job, a dream, a version of yourself, know this. You are still here. You are still whole. And what you carry inside you is more than valuable. It's irreplaceable. That is your human advantage. Never forget it. There will be days when you feel behind. There will be days when you question everything. On those days, come back to the truth. You are not a machine. You are not meant to keep up. You are meant to wake up. And once you do, the world will never be the same again. Elena Park.